And let's start with this side event on climate proofing communities through lifelong learning. I'm just going to set the context a bit, and then we have six speakers. Um, we will have some Q&A in between, and hopefully we'll be able to fit everything in the time that is available to us. So basically, I feel that when it comes to climate change education, there are three challenges, three type of challenges. And maybe because I'm a physicist, I tend to look at it in terms of space and time. But I'll just try to elaborate a bit what I have observed based on my interactions with general public, trying to bring climate issues to them. So there is one challenge of understanding the historicity, because Earth's atmosphere has not been steady and suddenly it started changing now. It has always been changeable, and this is a 4 billion year old planet. So what is happening right now? Why is that so serious compared to much more drastic changes that have happened in the past? Is a question that many people don't understand. Also, how things that happened at the time of the Industrial Revolution a few hundred years ago, how is that impacting us now? That also is something which needs to be explained. And on the other side of time, why should I be worrying about what is going to happen in 2100? So there are these time related issues with which people have problems, and that is where the whole denial of climate change comes in from. So to address that, it's important to address these questions. Then there are space related challenges, because if you are in the developed part of the world, which is typically the temperate zone, you see a lot of benefits coming from use of fossil energy, but you don't see the impacts to that extent. So for you, it is all good that energy has done for you. And there is also, because of the better technological advancement, better financial situation, there is a better capacity to adapt and build resilience. If you come to the tropical zone, then the contribution to climate change has been minimal, but the impacts are very huge. So it is all negative as far as fossil fuel use is concerned. And there is deficiency in adaptive capacity and resilience. And then there are some countries where the situation is extreme, because there are countries now struggling to even survive, to maintain their existence, and they have had absolutely no contribution to the problem. So this problem is originating from one location but impacting everywhere is also a correlation that is difficult for people to make, and therefore also that the solution happening anywhere will also work everywhere is difficult to understand. So there are these two important issues relating to the timeline of climate change, its impacts and its solutions, and relating to the spatial distribution of the problem and its solution. And then there is a lot of complexity when it comes to trying to follow the discussions around climate change, because there are all these terms that everyone is throwing around: mitigation, adaptation, now increasingly loss and damage. But what does it all mean? All this jargon and all this alphabet soup, the UNFCCC and NDC and whatever, it all confuses common people. There are also, the discourse on climate change is multidisciplinary. You have to understand a bit of science, you have to understand a bit of economics, you have to understand a bit of politics. That multidisciplinarity is also something which is challenging for many people. So according to me, these are the three main challenges that as an educator we need to address to build, even if we want to just build general literacy around climate change: the time challenge, the space challenge, and the complexity challenge. However, I'm sure we all agree that building climate literacy is very much needed at this point in time, because everybody is living in a climate challenged world, and we have to have life skills to deal with this. And knowledge in a way is power. So understanding what is happening around us will help us address some of these unknowns which are coming and hitting us. So we need to develop tools for climate education which are global and still have local context. Because the conversations that need to happen, let's say in Europe, have to be different from the conversations that need to happen in Africa. The education must spread very, very fast, and it must be across generations. You can't just keep talking to school kids, because those who are adults today really have to address the problem. The school kids, by the time their time comes, either the problem will be solved or they will benefit more from teaching them how to deal with disasters after disasters. So you have to also look at these generational differences in focus on climate education. And last but not the least, I believe that climate education must be science-based. There is a whole lot of spiritual mumbo jumbo about being stewards of the planet or about Mother Earth and all of that, which is sheer nonsense. We have to realize that this is about our existence. It is human existence which is in danger. The planet is going to survive, no matter what happens. It has survived 4 billion years, it will survive another 6 billion years as long as the sun is shining. It is the human species which is endangered, and it is the humans who have to protect humans. So it is not really about protecting the environment, it is about protecting humans. Because what we call ideal environmental conditions are the conditions which are best for humans to thrive in. The earth has been both hot house and an ice ball, and it has still survived. And it has sustained life also under both those conditions. So we have to understand that the environment that we want to protect is the environment which is conducive for human existence. And therefore it is a human-centric issue, and that is how it has to be dealt with. So looking at all of this, we believe that climate change education has to be localized, it has to be contextual, it has to be lifelong, and in order for that to happen, it has to be part of both formal and informal education. We need finance for climate education, and we also need policy support for climate education. Pedagogical challenges are also there. If you are trying to develop tools for climate education, then what should be the course contents which is part of the formal education for children and youth? This has to be engaging, and it has to be constantly evolving because the situation around us is changing every year. Classroom sessions, case studies, as well as experiential learning, how do we create the right blend which imparts education without creating a depression in the young generation. That balance is very, very delicate and must be maintained. The big challenge is lack of well-informed teachers, because there hasn't been enough effort on adult education for climate literacy. There has to be very high level of customization. What is the climate education that a fishing community needs is different from what is the climate education that factory workers need or an industrialist needs. It has to be part of the professional skill development or life skill development programs that are being set up. Use of technology for innovative content creation and delivery. This is actually across the board, there is a huge gap, because most of the educational content that is available is coming from the Western world and is not necessarily aligned with the priorities of the global South. How do we reach the right information to the marginalized communities? That is also another important challenge in this context. There has to be education in climate finance and climate in education finance. Training is needed for educators, both formal and informal. We need highly engaging and contextual content which is multilingual and rooted in local forms of expression. It is not just using the official language of the region, but also the language that people speak in. Constant updating is required because the topic itself is evolving, and skilling for a climate challenge world is a neglected area. Lot of new type of businesses, new type of income generating opportunities are emerging, and therefore new type of skills are required for that. So, for example, carbon accounting should become a more commonly available skill, but there are no courses on that. We have made a small beginning with an online course, but much more needs to happen in this context. Policy enablers are also not there. It is a neglected area overall. We need climate literacy for politicians and bureaucrats to start with. This also has to be contextual and global, forward looking beyond a single election or a bureaucratic appointment cycle. Link with existing policies and schemes. We find that there are many policies which can be aligned to deal with climate change but are not, just out of ignorance. I'm also thinking that what we need is to document people's lived experiences, both the challenges that they are facing, the solutions that they are figuring out, successes as well as failures, because that will be the knowledge base on which future generations can build. And if this has to be open source and accessible to everyone, what essentially we need is some kind of a climate pedia, which is also multilingual and accessible for everyone. If even if we start we begin doing something like that and see how it grows, that in itself will be a big contribution for future climate education. So these are some of the issues that I hope the speakers will be able to go deeper into from their own context. We have 6 speakers, Myron, followed by Ferruh, then Devleena, then Aravind, Filip and Sneha. The introductions are out there. I'll not waste your time by going through that. So that's the order in which the speakers will also go. And since we have started a bit late and people, I think some of you may have other engagements, we will take questions after each speaker. But I request each one of you to limit yourselves to about 5 to 7 minutes, so that we can have 2 or 3 minutes for questions. And if time permits, we'll have a common session at the end. So with that, I'm going to stop here and invite Myron. Myron, when you are done, you can invite the next.
We do not see her presentation. We do not see her presentation, unfortunately, but now we can listen at least.
So Priya, thank you, because you already spoke a couple of my first few slides anyway. So, so just to introduce you all to some of us who are from INEC. INEC is a network of about 22 different organizations and individuals working across the country of India on different issues, development issues. And what INEC essentially does is it brings a climate angle and climate perspective to the work on health, on education, on livelihoods, on food security, water security. We bring the climate lens to the work that our partners and our network does. And INEC, in fact, is one of the oldest institutes in India working on climate justice. It was established in 1996, and we come with a fair pedigree of experience from our founders and taking forward. And climate change education has been one of the biggest pillars of our work. And what we essentially do in climate, as Priya was talking about, and why lifelong learning, contextual learning and local experiences is important, is because our partners work at the grassroots. And as Priya said earlier, that the challenges faced at each partner or each ecosystem is very, very different from what we think on a global scale. And I won't talk much on this because Priya has already highlighted this for us with regards to, but for us, lifelong, contextual and local is what we're looking at and what we continue to do. And what I will talk about is some of the INEC processes that we have been involved with and through our partners and through the INEC process as well. So what we essentially do as for us when we're talking about climate change education, the main areas of engagement is looking at climate science and its impacts, looking at the politics of climate change, looking at the climate justice issue, especially to the communities that we are working with, and how they are able to cope now with the current situation. And from these three areas, how do they act or how do they react to the situation? And this is basically the kind of template that we follow with our communities and with the people that we work with. So I want to just highlight this. I put this polar bear over there. The reason being that we work with such grassroots organizations and such grassroots communities that they don't even know what a polar bear is. So if you talk to somebody and say, the glaciers are melting, if you go to a village in India, they'll be like, what does that mean? A polar bear has no significance to them. Melting glaciers mean nothing to them. Sea levels rising mean nothing to them. It is their local context when you're talking about, rainfall patterns, you're talking about weather patterns changing, you're talking about food yields reducing, you're talking about water scarcity. These are the things that, relate and they connect with. And that is why I put that over there to highlight that, how contextual the kind of engagement that we are having with our communities. I want to start with the most vulnerable communities that we work with, and these are indigenous, tribal, Adivasi communities. And this picture over here is actually a literacy course. It has nothing to do with climate change. The reason being that these women in their mid-30s and 40s cannot even read and write. They don't even know the number of 1 to 10 or even, the basic alphabet, the basic letters in the alphabet. And the reason is that because of that, they are challenged already. And then you bring in this whole context of climate change to them, they have no clue. So we start with, this community, and these communities are the most vulnerable because they are the most impacted when it comes to access to food, access to water, access to, enhanced livelihood. And our work with them continues. We will continue working with their kids. We continue working with these communities. They are largely indigenous in the sense they're not indigenous, but they're largely farming communities. So the idea of bringing the climate issue to them is through the farming process, in terms of how do you build capacities to them with bringing sustainable farming practices. How do you bring looking at innovating technology, water technology. How do you look at different kinds of climate friendly farming practices? And this is what we do with these communities, and we've seen a lot of change happen in them because what has happened, they might not have realized it, but their livelihoods have increased and they are able to cope better with the changing climate now. So with the tribal context, I also wanted to add that there are a couple of other areas that we are working with in terms of engaging with these communities. A lot of these communities also are, they're so remote. They're so remote that even government officials don't even reach their places. Medicines don't even reach them. Doctors don't even reach them. And if there are doctors who reach them, they are quacks who exploit them, So we look at, from a biodiversity perspective, looking at how herbal-based healthcare for these communities, looking at malaria coming in, looking at waterborne diseases that are increasing, looking at heat waves that are coming in. What are those kinds of remedies that are available within their own community from the indigenous knowledge? And we're also seeing that this indigenous knowledge is now missing and getting lost because of aspirations of the young people who want to become maybe more rural or maybe more urban also. And so we work with these communities in terms of how do you utilize sustainably your own resources available. Sustainable agricultural practice I've already spoken about. Contextual environmental education. We have a couple of modules where we are looking at how do you include culture into the climate or the environmental education. We're talking about your festivals, you're talking about the kind of clothing you wear, you're talking about the kind of foods you eat, and bringing the entire cultural discourse to the environmental process. And this has been boarded really well with the kids that we work with. We work with kids from the first grade right up to the 10th grade. And learning about their own culture and why it needs to be preserved from an environmental perspective. So for us also, it's not only the climate change perspective, but also the environmental perspective on large. That brings in the sustainable development issue. From the remote tribal areas, let me take you to the rural, which are slightly more developed in the sense that they have more access to electricity, more access to kind of healthcare, more access to education for with these communities. Largely, many of them are farming communities. We work with them in terms of talking about biodiversity protection. Why it is important? Because also these communities are being exploited. We are looking at external forces coming in, corporates coming in, exploiting their forests, exploiting their water, and they have no say in it. So also the idea of capacity building is, how do you address the kinds of challenges that you're having and who do you address it to? Because of the situation we have, people don't know where to go and who to go to. So, that is a big part of our listening in terms of, how do you access that and, how do you write a letter to a government official or to a village panchayat or village sarpanch. And these are the things that we work with. Looking at, from a climate perspective, this whole area of why food and nutrition security is so important, and including, instead of reducing the food basket, we are looking at increasing the food basket where more food is available, that is local. We've also seen that over the years, the local varieties of many of the foods, leafy vegetables, the tubers, the fruits have gone missing now because of the market forces that are there. So people prefer to buy, and a lot of those local indigenous foods have been missing. We've started introducing them to the communities now through kitchen gardens, through homesteads, through all these various processes, which one is for their own consumption and the other one is for the enhanced livelihood. So whatever they don't consume, they sell. And that continues also with our communities. And the third part is on how do you conserve water for drinking, for irrigation, and for sanitation. We are seeing streams drying up. We are seeing women going further and further into the forest to collect water. From, if it was half a kilometer, now they're traveling 3 kilometers to catch water. And what has also happened is that because of the women, the stream drying up, the women are keeping the girl child at home now to help them with this drudgery, to help them go collect water further into the stream. And so talking to them about water conservation and creating also water conservation technologies within the community that reduce their drudgery. And what happens with that is that the training happens is when you teach the village people how to maintain these technologies. How do you, if there's a problem, you don't need to call somebody to go, which takes 5-6 days to come to the village. So we train them, and so that's where the capacity building happens in terms of the technologies for the water technology. We also have a couple of technologies where we train communities on low carbon technologies like smokeless cook stoves. So if you look at this picture over here, this is a training of these women and this boy, and they go and build these cook stoves within the community itself, and they earn a couple of their livelihood from this thing. Introducing agricultural business processes, sustainable agricultural business processes, because people don't have an idea of marketing. People don't have an idea of linking market change from the yield to the consumer, and how do you reduce the middleman's engagement with that. And we really started this new this thing in terms of biochar preparation and biochar making of biochar. And it's in the nascent stage right now, but we see this as a potential also not only for the community, but also for the carbon mitigation perspective. In the urban context, is very different. It is not about survival for for your food and your water and for your this thing, but it is in terms of how do you sustain now, how do you become a sustainable, how do you have a sustainable lifestyle. So we've come up with a carbon calculator. We've come up with various processes in terms of going low carbon. We have a carbon neutral campus handbook that can be utilized by campuses to go carbon neutral. We have a couple of other processes in terms of courses that have been developed from our various partners across the country in terms of reducing your carbon emissions and becoming a sustainable consumer. And how do you become a sustainable consumer through the different processes? We also have a couple of sustainable lifestyle courses that are conducted within households, within communities on a larger scale as well. And these processes continue wherever we go, and they are also online. We can do these processes online as well as the physical processes. We learned a lot during COVID when this happened, to go online and do that. Some of the INEC products that we have, as I was talking about, is that we have modules that have been developed for us in terms of different courses. The climate-friendly workshops that are tailor-made for different communities. We have an engagement with young professionals, and this is where Priya was talking about, where we engage with different professions, whether it is a teacher, or whether it is a nutritionist, or whether it is a restaurant owner, and bringing them together and talking to them, number one, in terms of how your profession is being impacted by climate change, and secondly is how climate change is impacting your profession, and what is the synergies that we can come together with. And we've worked with various communities, various professionals, and one of the good outcomes of this is where we have been able to start engaging now with the startup community, because everything is so greenwashed right now. Everybody is sustainable. Everybody has got carbon neutral products and there is absolutely zero credibility behind it. So working with these communities and working with them in terms of how exactly are you carbon friendly or climate friendly, and how exactly can you work together to bring these products to the people. Exposure visits is very, very important, and working with the media in terms of one is with the media and one is I'm done, and one is in terms of creating different forms of media for engagement. I just wanted to end with this slide. I always find this very funny. This slide. It's a College of Architecture and Planning, and for climate change education, if that is not one of the pillars for climate action, everything is going to go haywire. And we're going to reach this stage where we're going to see something missing, and we're going to talk about climate action where the planning is not being done, and the planning can happen at the climate change, climate literacy, climate education, and the climate capacity building stage. So I will end over here, and you can take questions now also, or we can take questions later as well. We are in a hurry, right, Ferruh?
Now we are on environmental performance. Is that correct?
So if I have no questions, then I think I did a good job. So Thomas has a question.
If there is no question, it's not.
Yeah, please, or a suggestion, or from your experience as well.
Well, when listening to you and also focusing on the necessity to always take into consideration the mic. You again stressed how important it was to localize education, and I completely agree. And in our introduction, we heard that it should all be about being science-based, and that faith and value-based is not so relevant. I myself, I have some doubts about that, because when you start to localize climate education and you refer to the tribal context, then I would tend to believe that without also relating your education with their deeper value base, you will probably not reach that. Only talking about technology and technical solution and science-based understanding of problems, I think is very much important. And of course, nothing we should do should not be science-based, but taking the value base out, I have my doubts if that works.
No, actually, I think what Priya meant to say was that we are seeing a lot of hogwash happening, at least in the urban perspective. For
Whether it is urban or tribal or rural, my problem is that often the faith-based discussion has been used for years to justify the social stratification and social injustice. And the same arguments creep into the climate change discussion also. The fact that these people are victims of an economic system which has been created by their so-called superiors is being justified using their entrenched faiths and overall value system, which is highly problematic, and at some point we have to start breaking it. So science-based doesn't mean we are talking only about technology. Science-based means we are talking about climate justice. From the science-based assumption that all humans should have an equal and fair chance of development.
You're praying. Continue.
Well, if time allows. 2 weeks back I was in Indonesia and I met an NGO, and they do every day, they have about 100 school pupils coming to a natural reserve, and they have a 1-day tour program to talk about environment and climate change. And they told me, look, in the beginning we did it like a usual school curriculum, of course, very different because sitting in nature, being able to touch things. And then we still, when we met our first assessment, found that it touches people, but something is missing. And then we introduced as a second layer 1.5-hour window where we related to Islam, because that is a community central job. And they found that this helped, and even helped in the way that things that were teached just entered a little bit deeper. So I completely agree with you that of course you can use faith as a means of oppression, but of course also you can do it differently. And I think there's some value in it. And then I made one other example. The first climate conference I organized, we had the UNEP head, and he said, well, science is so important to understand the facts. Business is so important to make business cases out of it. Politics is so important to create the enabling frameworks. But you know what? Faith or philosophy is important, because without the value base, you tend not to take long-term decisions. Because policymakers want to be re-elected after 4 years, a businessman needs to show the business case after 8 years, and this intervention logic alone does not make it, but if you add the value base, then you become less successful.
Well, we are looking at the world right now, and it is most of the problems are linked with people's faiths. Perhaps that's the wrong approach to take.
No, but I agree with you, Thomas, because the cultural aspect of our curriculum has really been beneficial for the young kids, in terms of, and we are seeing it getting lost, especially in the tribal context. We're seeing that whole cultural and the value-based system of the community is getting lost, and they're adding it, bringing it into the thing from a conservation and from a biodiversity and environmental perspective. But we'll continue this conversation after the presentation. I want to introduce you to Ferruh, who we've had quite an interesting conversation a couple of weeks ago, and he is based out of Turkey, and he works for TERRE and is the Corporate Affairs Director for Asia and the Middle East and Africa. And Ferruh, we're very happy to have you here. They've been doing some fantastic work, in fact, within the company. And we wanted to let him share the kind of work that they've been doing and understand from a corporate perspective, what is it that climate education and capacity building means to them. So Ferruh, welcome. Sorry for the delay.
very nice introduction, Myron. So it was also great to be introduced to you through a common friend, and I think that opened up an opportunity for me to be able to speak here. So thanks for inviting me to this. So I won't introduce myself as you already did, but I just want to introduce TERRE first, and what we do and how that is related to our climate education model. So first, TERRE is a part of TERRE Group, the bigger conglomerate that's focusing on three main things. One is the milk and dairy farming. For that, we have a company called Laval that's providing solutions to the dairy farmers. Then there are two more companies, TERRE and SIDEL. SIDEL is a packaging company that's mostly offering packaging on PET, glass, and other materials. And TERRE, we focus on paper-based materials, paper-based packaging, but also we have solutions for food processing, especially dairy processing, juice processing. And that kind of differentiates us and puts us into a unique position in the market. So we have global presence in around 160 countries, 24,000 almost employees. And every year, or just last year, in 2022, we manufactured around 193 billion packages. It's a lot of food. So those packages, of course, is very crucial to protect food because most of them are having technology called aseptic technology that provides 6 months and beyond shelf life to perishable food without any preservatives and any refrigeration. So that's crucial for food security and safety. But of course, it also creates waste. So that's why we have to ensure that all packaging is recycled properly. So we are working around the world with 200 recyclers that can recycle our packaging, and globally we have 26% recycling rate. And if you think about the whole world, 26% is not bad. In countries like Europe, it goes up to maybe 70, 80, 90% now. But of course, in more emerging markets, developing nations, it's relatively less. But also we have processing equipment in the countries and our customers that's processing the milk, the juice, and that's why we have an interesting approach to climate and also to food security. So first, I think we all know about the global challenges. The world's population is growing to almost 10 billion by 2050. Although enough food is produced right now, 1/3 is of it wasted. But at the same time, the carbon footprint of food systems is actually the second biggest one after energy. If you look at the whole sectors, food sector is the second biggest. So the big question is then, how are we going to feed a growing population sustainably by reducing the climate impact of food and also reducing the impact of packaging? And that's what we are focusing on. So if we look into our overall climate footprint of our food value chain, scope 1, 2, and 3, 31% or 37% combination. 31 is raw materials and then 6% transportation. So 37% comes from our materials, suppliers of raw materials and how they provide that to us, how they transport us. Only 1% of our climate footprint is our own operations, our own factories and our own offices and our travel. 55% of our climate impact comes from the processing machines that we have in our customers. And those are the ones that we are having, this is our hotspot, 55%, the biggest one. And then 7% comes from the life cycle or the waste management of our packaging. Okay? So in total, of course, when we look at education, we have to look at it from this perspective. So if this is our climate impact, where we can have the biggest impact. 55% of impact is the obvious one, to focus on our processing. Backend is of course a B2B discussion, so we are working with our suppliers and educating them. And then that leaves also with the 7%, which is the consumers. So that's why our education focus is based on consumer education and also our food processing education. And then the food processing education for us is of course the smallholder farmers, because of course we have big customers, the Danone, the Nestle, so they don't need the education from us, but the smallholder farmers are where we can create an impact. So we have a department called Food for Development, and they go and they work with the dairy farmers with a model that we call the dairy hub model. In the dairy hub model, we go to smaller villages or rural areas and then connect with local smallholder farmers with our big customers by creating this hub model. So in the hub, we first of all provide training to the smallholder farmers so that they can create a much more efficient dairy farming. This reduces the overall, of course, dairy climate impact. As you know, a significant impact comes from the cows. So if you have a more efficient, high milk yields with the cows, then that is your cow. So that's what we do. But it's not just pure training, because we also connect them with financial institutions. We connect them with our customers, and we secure, the purchasing agreement with them. So our customers end up having a quality milk coming to them as a solution, and the dairy farmer has a guaranteed way of selling their product, as long as, of course, they increase their quality and they become a part of this dairy hub model. So with the dairy hub model, we managed to reach 68,000 almost farmers around the world, and we have 22 farms, dairy hubs globally in various countries. I could not list here. And if you look into the results, every day 1 million liters milk is produced from these dairy hubs, which are much more efficient. And then Bangladesh example, the milk yield increased 144% in the dairy hub. And the farmer's income increased from $100 to $244. So significant impact on the small household farmer, but also significant impact in terms of increasing the yields, the dairy yield, and the milk yield, which can reduce the climate. So how we do that? Of course, collaboration is key here. So we collaborate with multiple entities, we collaborate with donor agencies, with local NGOs, with the government, and I think that's really key in providing a proper education and a kind of game-changing education. You need to really bring all the parties together, and you need to create a multilateral, agency connection and with private sector and with government. So with that, we can create a much bigger impact. So FAO, WTP, GSNFM, so these are all, GIZ, CDAM, some of the institutions that we collaborate with. The second one is the schools, because we go to the consumers, especially to the young generation. With the schools, what we do is two things. And first, again, we have this holistic approach that we just don't, similar to the dairy farms, we just don't do our training, so we connect the whole solution. In the schools, the same thing. So we approach the issue of education typically to provide a school meal program. First of all, to be able to increase, the nutritional value that kids are getting. So around the world, we started the school meal program back in 1960. So the first program was in Mexico, and it's just last year, in 2022, 66 million school kids were delivered school meal in their local schools. But then we combine the school meal program with the waste management, environment, and recycling. So we provide, post-consumption documentation and guidelines to them. We provide environmental training to them. We provide, an overall for their local communities and mobilization tool for them, so that if they want to contribute to the recycling, they go to the website and they can check where are the recycling collection points, and as students they can contribute to that. And also we show them some unique ways of creating products out of empty packages. So a couple of examples here. These are school posters that we educate the schools. Then we have those training sessions that we deliver them how to clean an empty beverage carton, how to turn it into a recycling potential product, and how to also, of course, reach out to certain recyclers through that website. So in Malaysia, just one country example, as I said, we exist in many countries. This schooling program combined with recycling training has been going on for more than 10 years. It's not just like one-off corporate socially sponsored. 10 years of continuous engagement, reaching to 700,000 students, 1,000 schools in Malaysia, and 600 tons of beverage cartons collected through only the schooling program. And we have such programs in many other countries, India, Vietnam, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, many countries that are coming. This is the website that we connect them to the recyclers, and then this is kind of unique product that they create, like bags and shopping bags and other things, by using beverage cartons. So with that, I think if I try to summarize and connect to what INEC presented as well, I think it's quite important to recognize first of all the importance of education in creating a resilient and sustainable future for our community. It's really about humans, as you said, it's not about the world, but us. So how we are going to be surviving in this community. And for that, I think obviously integrating education to school curriculum is quite important, because young minds, young kids, they will be educated at an early age, and that will take them through lifelong with them. But unless it's part of the school curriculum, it's quite difficult to reach them. You need to work with the Ministry of Education to make the curriculum as part of school. Community engagement is important, but that needs to come from a kind of grassroots. I think dairy farmers and the smallholder farm engagement for us is quite an important part of it. We go to them instead of asking them to come first and lecture them, and then we connect and we go to them not just with one training but an overall economic solution that impacts their livelihoods. And then there's a side effect of course, the better climate impact. As I said, this should be really beyond CSR, a holistic approach that we provide a full solution for the community, for the farmers. And ultimately, policy is one thing I think that you mentioned as well. Making this, utilizing policy as an enabler that opens and not kind of blocks what you're doing is quite important. So that's why we have to involve government and make policy part of the discussion. So with that, thank you for listening to me. If you have any questions, I'll take questions.
Have you been able to make any headway with the policy in any of the countries that you are?
In our program, we do, because again, our school, for example, education is.
Have you been able to influence government policies anywhere?
On the climate side, we are working with governments in many countries, and our key contribution is really to contribute to the waste management side and to shape what is called the extended producer responsibility schemes. Because EPR is one of the best way of waste management, and we have expertise from many other countries. So we share that expertise and we kind of provide best known methods that works, and with that we shape the policy of waste management in the countries.
Just one question, Sarah, was looking at the school milk program and the dairy hub program. The location of the dairy hub are very different from the school milk program. They're very different location. Do you plan on joining these together? So the milk would go back to the. I don't know how that works.
So for us, the dairy hub is more, the milk producers, the dairy farmers. So that's why we have to go to the rural areas and connect with them where they are. Whereas the school is about waste management, and waste happens in the cities. So that's why the schooling program is more for the cities and the schools together with government and public schools, and to reduce the impact of the waste. Whereas the other is to increase the quality of milk.
Yes, so since you're associated with the dairy chain, big discussions around is that methane emissions from the cattle farms, biggest contributor to climate change. So any of such use cases that you've come across for the methane emission from cattle farms, methane emission from cows?
So for the methane emissions, we work with our customers like Danone. We have a strong collaboration with Danone, and just 2 days ago, there was this World Business Council for Sustainable Development (WBCSD) meeting in another part of Dubai in the festival city, and we work with Danone talking about how they have this methane program, because we don't want directly change them, but they can do it as our customers. So that's why we do it through our customers.
Anybody else?
Thanks a lot, Ben.
Thanks, sir. It's very interesting. We're looking forward to seeing how we can work with you in the future.
I suppose next speaker, yes.
Devleena.
Okay, so then I will invite Devleena to introduce herself, because there's not much here that I can talk about.
Alright. Okay, so I'm going to talk about oceans. A little bit about my introduction. I'm a data scientist, trained as a data scientist, working in climate modeling and climate science for a little over 6+ years now. About 5.5 years ago, while studying coastal flood modeling, we realized that the group that are mostly affected by coastal flood on a long-term basis, and not only during the flood event are the small-scale fisheries. None of us were from the fishing family background. None of us had any idea of what they were facing on a day-on-day basis. None of us had any idea of the climate challenges these communities faced. But it was a very interesting use case for us, and we kind of delved deep into it. So here is what I would talk about, the climate issues faced by small fishing communities and where we are and what we do and how we are going about it. Let's talk about the Climate Crew as an organization we are representing. We are a seaweed digital platform company. I'll come to the seaweed, unpack it as I go. But our entire journey starts around working and understanding the fishing community. And globally, it's a 3 billion people who are dependent on oceans as a source of livelihood. When I say that, it's the community as large, at large, supports multiple different things that happens on the seafood and the ocean-related value chain. You're talking about small scale, large scale. You're talking about people who handle different parts of the value chain systems, and you're talking about many people who are dependent on seafood as a single source of livelihood and food. So coming to the numbers we're looking at is we have 800 million odd people who are just small scale fisheries, which means their daily sustenance depends on catching fish from the sea. These communities are very rural, very remote, and in developing countries, 90% of fisher folks are small scale fisheries, out of which 47% are women. And you realize that 67% of these communities do not have access to any kind of formal credit, formal insurance, any kind of technology upskilling, and this has been the situation for a couple of years now. Their forefathers did not really have to depend on technology. They really did not have to depend on any kind of interventions to really figure out their day-on-day fishing business. But given the climate change, given the various aspects of the changing natures of ocean, they are increasingly feeling the need for having some kind of a technology that can really understand what is happening on a daily basis, how the climate patterns are changing in the ocean, and how can they navigate. So we started with that, and we realized, as everybody was talking about, we realized that when you talk about climate education or climate literacy in these communities, you have to really start with understanding how they perceive it and how are they incentivized to really knowing the knowledge or knowing the technology so that they can adapt it. So a large part of our working with these people went into really understanding what they need on a day-to-day basis and then translating this technology into ways and means and figures and forms and various dialogues that they can understand in multiple different languages. So what we realized, and this I kind of stress it wherever I go, is that whenever I talk about fishing communities, whenever I talk about small-scale fishing communities, the general question is that are they tech savvy? Do they have a mobile phone? Do they have access to internet? We were also pretty not very sure about it, but our last 6+ years of working with these communities in India, in Sri Lanka, in Philippines, in Indonesia and parts of Southeast Asia, we realized that technology, they are very savvy compared to, in fact, much more than compared to farmers. Primarily, maybe because they had to do it all of their own. They own not one but multiple mobile phones, so they more or less have the technology background needed. What they're missing was access to data that is applicable to them when they're out in the sea. And what do I mean by that? I mean by that, for a person like me and you who are spending almost all our lives on land, weather advisories and marine advisories is very similar. For a person who's going out fishing out in the ocean, the kind of weather and marine advisories they need is very different. None of the websites provide them that. So having to think of from that lens was very important for us. Also the fact that there are things that marine data like sea surface temperatures, like a chlorophyll, salinity, various levels, they understand it, maybe not from the language that we speak, but from the experience of dealing with them for generations altogether. So what we started doing is, again, we operate out of India. In India, every state is a country in its own, and we started spending time with the fishing community. What I also have to do is that, since I'm not from that background, I'm not from the community at large. We got people who are from fishing community background in our team, who are marine biologists, who understand kind of can liaison between the community sentiments. Somebody talked about value, kind of help us breach that trust barrier, speak the language they understand, and then slowly start interacting with them and understanding what we can provide them and how they can map. And of course, see that transform into something that is enabling or impacting them on a day-on-day basis. So in short, the first thing that we came up is a app called OFish. This OFish app helps fishing communities of fishermen, marine fisher folks, in reducing their time out in the sea by almost 5 times. By which I mean, compared to the traditional or their forefathers who used to come back in 2 or 3 hours of fishing trip, given climate change, given the fact that the entire fishing zones have drifted far out in the sea, the entire nature of the fishing migration has changed, or fish migration has changed. They were spending more and more time out in the sea. So they're ending up spending a lot of fuel. 80% of the cost of trip is fuel. So their costs were escalating year on year. So first thing we realized that we have to handle is how can we cut down that cost. And for that, we provided the marine and weather advisories in the form of an app, which they can open from the comfort of their home. And if they realize that this is not a good day for going out fishing, they don't go, or they realize where they have to really go. They aim for that and not really spend out the circumnavigating motions. So that was the first our interventions, and through that we also worked up the supply chain. I'll talk about that a little bit. Of understanding how to really handle the community better, how traceability helps them, how understanding the market linkages helps them. So those things went first 4 to 5 years of our work with the communities. But what we also realized while doing that is this entire companies are looking for additional income. Why so? Because overall the number of fishing days have reduced drastically. So a fisherman or a fisherwoman or a fisher family who could depend on just fishing for their entire monthly source of income, that has gone haywire. So they were looking for additional source of income which can be localized. They don't have to migrate out in the towns. They don't have to upskill themselves in something that are not traditionally suited to their family systems or family values. So that's where we realized that we had to kind of bring in something that really work for them well in the place where they are, and that's where seaweed came into focus. And seaweed being a crop that can be easily harvested, easily grown out in the ocean with a very minimum or half a day training with the community is something that we started last year. And a part of it is also given the fact that we are a technology first company and we use satellite data for analyzing the spot out in the ocean where seaweed can grow the best. We continue doing that. So earlier on, when we started applying satellite data to analyze potential fishing zones, now we started analyzing satellite data for analyzing where to grow the seaweed. So the least amount of the communities know that this has good potential, and the overall outcome of the farm as well. But what is also is vital apart from this is that the fact that we have a field team that goes into every such fishing villages, works with them, trains them, and also enables them to understand what is the incentive. If they take up seaweed, which is a very new thing in India, how is that going to benefit them? What's the number of days or hours they are going to spend in seaweed versus something else that they can do? What's the buy-in factor? Is there a value add at the end of the month? Is this going to sufficiently or significantly, improve my income source? So all those goes as a part of the training. So climate training for us is deeply intertwined with, your financial literacy as well. So you cannot really segment the other one from the other, because you're talking to communities that are inherently, looking at it as a value angle. So we have our team of people who speak multiple different languages, who speak the local languages, and we have these trainings that are conducted with them and help them understand what is in it for them. And at the end of the day, we also buy the seaweed from them and take it further up the value chain. So inherently working with us, that not only helps them to grow and cultivate seaweed, but also in buying back, gives them immediate value add. So that's the app that I was talking about. It's easily operable from their homes. It's a fisherman just has to enter their details of where they are, which port they operate from. Once that is done, they're able to see how is the potential fishing zone of the area that you live in. Where is there an algae bloom nearby? If there's an algae bloom, I'm almost done. Then they should not venture out there. So it's more or less a guideline to them to reduce their fishing trip on a daily, the length of the trip on a daily basis, and cut their cost. And for the seaweed farmers, we work with a lot of women. Out of 10 out of 15 people who work in a farm are women, and we train them once, and they continue to be working with us on a 45-day cycle. Last but not the least is that a part of the process is also training them on various different technologies, portable, easily available, cost-friendly ones that can be used at their end, like portable, your storage devices, your cost-effective and sustainable nets that we do as a part of market linkages, where we connect to these remote communities who don't have any other forms of market linkages. So this last mile linkage is very important for us and very important for anybody who works with these communities. That brings to my last slide. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Investigating what was going on in these applications, so refrigeration, industrial, commercial, fish markets, structures, different options that you have in the rack. You have the and also green layer
Yeah, thanks, Devleena. I'm familiar with your work, and I also know the challenges with regards to working with these communities. How successful has it been with these communities? When you go down to them, but this is a new technology. This is something can be overbearing. Some of them might not even be used to an app, or some of them might not be even used to having a technology, some kind of technology that enhances them. And how does the process that you all work in terms of creating the transition? How has that experience been?
Sure. So we underestimate them largely, and I love telling the story that the app for us is an Android app, but in more than one community when we go, they ask us, do you have an Apple app? So we largely underestimate them. So they are not technology, they are really technology savvy. App is not something that we never had to really happily know. We are happy that they had an access or understanding of how to really use mobile apps. Where we really face the problem is the buy-in and the trust barrier. Because the communities, even in a country like India, they have been largely neglected when it compared to farming communities. We see on a comparison, farmers get a lot of subsidies, farmers get a lot of loan waivers. What is the government doing for us? So there are hardly any policies stitching their issues together. So that's the barrier, and that's trust barrier we have to really overcome. So early on, thankfully, I realized that again, if you have to really work with them, you have to have somebody representing them from there. So one part of our process is to be able to identify a local person whom we talk, and that person really helps us in spreading the message through. Apart from that, technology-wise, and you know it better than everybody else, is that we had to redesign the app several times, where we really look into, does this icon mean settings to them? Does this icon means symbols and your various iconography that we're using on the mobile phone that really clicks with them. That had to go through a lot of design. So people-centric design, or whatever you call it, human-centric design, had to be really specific. We had to conduct interviews with them, saying that what does it mean? How does it represent? Where did you navigate? Are you using the app in the ocean? Are you using app in out in the broad sea? I mean, like, are you able to see a yellow color versus? Yeah, so we had to go through multiple different design iterations to really get that thing right.
Here we are going to pivot as well in this sector, and I should invest a lot of next year.
Since you are a data scientist, this app is generating a lot of data at the back end. Will that be useful for getting a sort of a more granular understanding of climate impacts on the fishing community? That's number one. And secondly, how does the ethics of using the data in order to do those kind of studies work? And is there any value in exploring that for future of fishing communities?
Right. So when it comes to data, we do not generate data, we consume data. By which I mean that we analyze satellite data from NASA and ESA sources and provide those insights to them. Very early on in my working with the community, I've realized that fishermen don't like being tracked. So we had a feature where we said you could maybe track your routes on the sea. Hey, look, you would see where you went out fishing yesterday or day before yesterday. They were completely not interested in it. In fact, that kind of aggravated our trust barriers. So we had to cut down that feature altogether. So they come to the app, they see the insights, and they leave. So that's what we have kept it short. So we made sure that they don't feel threatened, because a lot of times they are asked to give a lot more information about the fishing trip, where they don't feel that they are getting any value add by giving this information. So that's something that we had to stretch into a design. The second bit is that, the satellite data on an aggregated basis, what we analyze, that helps you understand how did the patterns change. I mean, basic things from climate perspective, how your season's temperatures, your wave action, your wind action has changed, so that your entire coastal fleet, where is the next, how your cyclones are increasing on a year-on-year basis, which area is mostly getting impacted. We did a cyclone analysis of Orissa and Cyclone Fanny. What was the demographic impact? So all those studies really help us to understand where we are heading in the next few years.
Thank you. Sorry, I couldn't right now. I want to find out if your technology is transferable, especially areas where we have communities. Some parts of Ghana we are not having challenges. Is this something that is transferable?
Absolutely.
Willing to share?
Absolutely. We can transfer the technology in any part of the world. We're happy to talk to you about this, and we can just map out the area from a satellite basis and give a app that is completely customizable to Ghana. We should talk.
Yes, I'll be happy to do.
Those are all the questions I had. Anybody last question?
There's a agenda.
We are running out of time.
Okay.
We'll take it off.
We can take it right
Yeah.
now.
Yes, the use of natural refrigerants in air conditioning. There's a specific plan to show how to improve.
Okay, introduce yourself.
Thank you. Really happy to be here, and my name is Aravind Unni, and I'm here representing IGSS, which is Indo Global Social Service Society. And my colleague is also here, Srijita Sirkar, and she's also with IGSS. So we are essentially going to be talking about the work that we've done in urban communities, in urban poor communities, And again, essentially sharing, so firstly putting down on the table that I'm not an expert on climate change. I'm not I mean, the jargons and all those things. I'm also the one who's struggling with a lot of them. But why we started with this intervention, especially in 2020, because IGS has a long history of work in urban areas, rural areas, so on and so forth. But in 2020, post-COVID times is when we really realized that communities are in need of engaging on urban resilience. They are in need of engaging on the question of sustainability in their actions of where they are located, how do they view their livelihoods. So those were the questions that we were dealing with in 2020 because of COVID being one prime mover. And the fact that urban poor communities are the most impacted in climate change, disasters, impacts that we see on a day-to-day basis. That was a prime mover, and since then, in the last 3 years, this is the scale of the work that we have carried out with good 200, 300 odd communities across India, across multiple states, and that is the sort of learning and sharing that we will be wanting to present here, of how we engaged, how we began, what were our mistakes, and what did we learn from that going forward. Oops, I just jumped straight to the answer. But yes. So, who are we talking about? These are urban poor communities. It's, I mean, easy to look at and bracket that they are poor and they earn less, so on and so forth. But essentially, to think from their point of view, to think of where they are located at this stage, they are primarily residents of informal settlements, slums, bastis, depending upon where you are, how you call them. They are very precariously located. They are mostly informal sector workers, again badly impacted because of climate change. Yesterday we had this daily loss and damage terminology that we pushed for informal workers. So they experience daily loss and damage in their lives. There is a section, if you look at the cross-section of the communities, there is the elderly, the generation that always felt that we are out of the mainstream and they are usually not that educated formally. There is the youth who are very, I think, at least have access to formal education. They've gone to schools, they've gone to colleges, but their aspirations are very middle class. Back home we call middle class aspirations, but their aspirations are very sort of unmindful of the bigger challenges that we face. But they are receptive to issues of climate change also. Last point on COVID, the reality is, at least in the Indian context and maybe in the South Asian context, that for the first time, at least in my experience of 15 years of working in this sector, I am seeing that urban incomes also have kind of dwindled, gone down by 20 to 30% in most of the households and in most of the informal workforce. So that is the kind of space and location that these communities are in. And when we took our case of we want our settlements to be climate resilient, we want to engage with urban resilience as an issue, it didn't really ring a bell. Their thing was that we are struggling for our daily bread. What are we going to eat today? You're talking to me about something 10 years in future. I'm not worried about that. Tell me what I'm going to do now. What is my life tomorrow? That is. Okay, I will then speed up. So what we did was, step number one was, don't go into the technicalities, because we are not making scientists out of communities that are dealing with climate impacts. Just to make them understand of what is climate change, how does it differ from weather, how does it differ from a season. Just understand that pattern and understand that through community generated knowledge, where you engage with your history of the community. Why is the community named a certain way? Where have your forefathers or mothers or grandmothers come from? So on and so forth. So you engage with the community to understand the history of the community and chart it in a 50-year time frame to understand what is climate change, point number one. Also, what we noticed was that the aspects that we were not mindful of, but the communities were. Like they were also mindful of Kide Makode, which means insects and creatures that we as civil society organizations were not that mindful to. But this really helped the community understand climate change in a much more visual manner and engage with the same. Here I will just actually quickly pass on the modules. If someone just wants to glance quickly, that would be useful. Second, understanding climate change is one thing, but to understand how it impacts your community, how injustice is being meted out in a certain way, how your vulnerability is connected to the injustice, is then we take ABC of climate change, which really tries to break down this whole notion of COP, mumbo jumbo, and so on and so forth. I also call this, by the way, mumbo jumbo number 2.0. But to like really break down the terminologies for people and communities to engage with, and to locate your community and understand why are you where you are, why are you next to a drain, why are you and your community being evicted in the name of environment and climate change. So understand what is happening, understand the location of your community, and aspire to engage with the state. Take letters to the departments, take letters for your demands, thinking of your community and your community needs. Last step is that we look at Unnat Basti, improved settlement. We don't say an ideal settlement or a model or so on and so forth. Models have actually made life hell for all of us. So stay away from models. We are looking at improvements of where we are. And one slogan was Hamara Basti, Hamara Ghar, Hamara Yojana. It means that this is my settlement, my home, my plan. Keeping in mind the ecology and the other challenges there. And if the state doesn't work, we have made our own houses, we do our own employment, we live and feed ourselves, the community feeds ourselves. We will prepare plans and start the implementation of our plans with or without the state, with or without the civil society organizations. That pushes the notion from just mapping the vulnerabilities, but going forward to actually implementing some of those, and in which you can pool your own resources, pool your own strengths as well, and you take those demands in maps, in better drawn diagrams to the state. In conclusion, we have done all of these, and around 250 communities have made those local area plans. They are now getting sums of, I don't know, like 1 crore rupees. I don't know how that will translate. 1 crore, 3 crore proposals are getting done for their toilets there, but all keeping in mind which areas get flooded, which don't, where do you want the seating area to be. So all those aspects are coming into their plans. We are hoping that going forward this gets translated into policy, which slums do not have at this stage in India. We hope that this gets translated into budget allocations in urban areas. We hope our local area plans become climate action plans for slums or informal settlements, because it's not just the countries that get to do the NDC or the cities that get to do the climate action plans, because climate action plans are for people and are for settlements. This is something that Priyadarshini has already well put earlier, so I will not repeat some, but mostly our learnings and our way forward. Thank you. I appreciate it.
So since we are running out of time, we'll skip the question answers which we can take offline. Filip, go ahead.
I hope I said it right. You can see on the screen that here and also on the slide, the program, and I'm very happy that we're support on the program to really bring this topic of the sector to the International Climate Initiative of the German government, and it's now in its third year.
Thank you all very much for your attention so far. My name is Filip. I am by trade a development economist and currently a scholar at Cambridge University. And yeah, just give me the hand. Boy, you should be able to hear me now. Thank you so much. Quick background on me. I'm a development economist by trade and a scholar at Cambridge University. I do work with the United Nations as a part-time advisor between Geneva and New York. It's been a real pleasure to be actually talking about these subjects, because we're passionate about climate education and very much the intersection between governance, between institutions, between corporations, and how we can all come together and create an impact in both developing and developed nations. Another point that I want to make, I've been also trying to leverage technology into some of the work I'm doing, so something that we heard before. So I'm part of an AI company over in MSG. They're actually developing solutions for monitoring climate reporting and climate change related reporting. Let me just get started on the panel. I will split this into two parts. One on the importance of climate education, and the other one on the importance of governance within institutions and how we can all drive change and really galvanize this next step for impact across institutions, across governments, and across corporations. I wanted to highlight kind of the context we're really in right now, because we really do exist in a state of disequilibrium. It's so hard to accept climate science if you're not in this area. There's so much climate denial in general that's being just disseminated across all channels, whether it's web, in person, both in developing countries. And something that one of my favorite authors really said, Naomi Klein, she pointed out it's so hard to look at as humanity, what's hard to look at. And this is the reality. We wake up every day, we come to work in our fossil fuel cars, we have lunch that's being cooked for electricity or through gas that's going to fossil fuels, and we wear clothes that are basically sourced from non-sustainable, both in terms of environmental, social, or economic models. And for us, it's so difficult to actually navigate this environment and ecosystem in the sense that how we as individuals can make an impact, how we can make a change. So hence we start to delegate to our politicians. And obviously we're all at fault right now, and we all know the politicians have not been doing anything tangible for the past 28 sessions. So I guess it's really clear that we are in a state of disequilibrium and ontological really disbelief into how we can coexist and live within a natural environment. So how do we actually transform the system? Because at the end of the day, we need systemic change for this. Education is necessary, but education must power systemic change. And first of all, as a solution, I would like to propose more engagement in the top and highest level of academia. We have been having a lot of this lately, the past 5 years. It's been gaining a lot of pace. But what we have been lacking is real partnership between the global north and the global south. Whether it's the LCDs or the small island developing countries, these regions have really unique challenges, and we need to, first of all, get the academia across to their research so we can inform policymakers on how we can address these challenges. So what we need is new frameworks, real data, new human resources, institutional and technological resources, to basically provide us with a new system for developing the next level of education. And the next level of educational institutions, they're individualized, personalized, future-proof, and climate-centric. Another thing I want to point out really is all about lifelong learning. We have not been doing this enough, I guess, in all parts of the world. Lifelong learning is such a vital tool for us to enable the next level of innovation and development of whether it's solutions, place-based solutions, new technologies. Every single person on this planet Earth will be impacted with climate change, and we need every single person engaged in the solution making to fight these issues. So, how do we actually implement all these ideas, and how can we bring them to communities? Because obviously, as I noted, we have to have new levels of delivery for the education, but we also have to have new top-down approaches. So for this, what I've been working on at my institute and with many other stakeholders is really kind of driving this endogenous level of change within institutions, whether it's corporate, whether it's institutions that are academic or government-based. We absolutely need people from inside because driving this change, because lately we've been all talking about bottom-up approaches. Bottom-up approaches are excellent, but we need strong capabilities for them in the first place. And what's the number one issue when we're talking about developing countries' issues? Lack of capabilities on the ground. So we cannot just go in circles. We have to implement the process. And then I want to start to talk about private sector as well. I come from, I'm actually a finance analyst by trade, and I work in one of the largest investment banks. So for me, I understand the institutional aspect as well. For this, we really need to make sure that organizational governance and corporate governance comes into play in climate change related issues. So for this, obviously, as I said, endogenous change, people from the inside driving local initiatives, but also creating a global impact. Lastly, I just want to go something that has been quite on my mind, ESG. It's being thrown all over, especially corporate. ESG has so much to play with education. It's a cycle as well. But education is necessary to kind of enable that social factor, social benefit. So, if we're going to conclude the general takeaway from my speech today, we really need all fronts, but we need to start at the top, because if it's rotten at the top, you won't be getting much change at the bottom. So thank you very much.
So our last speaker is Sneha, who will also conclude the session as the co-organizer of this discussion.
Hello everyone, I'm Sneha from TERRE Policy Center. I know we are running short of time, so I won't make it a bigger presentation, but I'll make it very short. The TERRE Policy Center, we are an NGO based in Pune, working for the environment, established in 2010. and we are accredited by IUCN, UNFCCC, and various other organizations. We work in few of our domains here is we work for the environment conservation awareness, where we do afforestation activities, CSR activities, renewable energy, resource promotion, so it's also what we do, watershed development. We also conduct awareness programs for different strata of the society, be it for the children in school as well as the elders from the society who are willing to understand what is climate change, what is environment, and the knowledge what they had, which was our traditional knowledge, and what they are skipping out now and what they are losing over, is what we are trying to connect them back. We also work with various tribal communities for their livelihood generations in the coastal regions of the west coast as well as in the western Ghat regions. This is some of our pictures where we have interacted with the local people, where we have done some of the watershed development initiatives. Moving on to today's topic, where education is involved. So we have already published various publications for the school children, where we give them education on very basic as like what is environment and why do we have to conserve. Because I believe we have come up to such a stage that we talk on very bigger terms and we miss out on things of giving them importance even to a very basic question such as what is environment. So we start from there for the students. So we have this one would be say training that is learning through play, not making it too serious for the students. We interact with them through various games. So everyone must be knowing about the snake and ladder game, which we have played in our childhood. So what we have done is we converted that game into an environment education game, where it's basically if you do something good for the environment, you climb the ladder and you do which is negative to the environment. The snake eats you down and you come down. So what good you will have to do that will give you a ladder back. So the children interact, we have a bigger the board which has been made and they walk on it and they climb and they come down. So that is how the students interact with us and that remains in their memory. So what is the do's and don'ts is what remains impacted on them. We also have this business game which we used to play earlier. So that game also we have converted into environment awareness game, where we create awareness about the various wildlife sanctuaries and the national parks in entire India which is there, is what we highlight for that. Then we have another initiative that is TERRE Olympiad. This is an online quiz competition for the students from standard 5th to undergraduate, where we give them the courses of environment education and we have an exam, it's an online exam in 2 rounds, and then we give them gifts as well for participating and the winners are selected through this. To understand the energy conservation, we have designed solar lamp. So we teach the dropouts of standard 10th and 12th the assembly of the solar lamps, and the solar lamps were distributed in the society among the students as well as the rural communities. So we had certain programs for plantation which we have done in Assam, where we train the women of the community to take care of the nursery, how to grow plants, the plantation, taking care of. So this training programs, education has also been conducted for the local tribal communities of Assam and Odisha. As well as we are taking one of the projects in the western coast of India, that is on mangrove conservation. So under this project, we are training the women and of the local community, the fishermen community there, of nursery development of the mangrove species and the plantation of the species in that area. So in this process, we undertake all the important aspects of the coastal conservation, the species conservation as well as with the community. Concluding or summing up, what we believe is conservation or protection should always be bottom to top approach, because it's the community or it's the local people after all who is dealing with all these issues in their day-to-day life, rather than the people sitting in the closed offices and discussing over the tables what to do and how to do. The involvement of the local community is utmost important because they are the ones who are facing it every day. Involving the younger generation, we just cannot force them on top, like you have to know this and you have to do this. But if you make it little in a fun-loving or in a playful manner, they will also get involved in this and the right education will go. Obviously, training the communities will address the climate change. And I just missed out one of our initiatives, that is the ocean literacy course, which we also conduct. And that is just not focusing on the children, because we say the younger generation has to be trained. But as Priyadarshini ma'am already mentioned that statement, yes, younger generation has to be trained. But by the time they reach in the position of taking actions, probably we are too late for it, or they are just taking preventive measures. So the people currently in the position of decision-making people, they are the one who has to be trained as well. So leaving our, yes, we all are qualified, leaving the text of our qualification, we have to get down, come together and take forward the basic education on environment, conservation and climate change. So with this, I would like to conclude our session. I would like to thank Priyadarshini ma'am, to all our speakers for presenting their views, and as well as Nilta ma'am for this session as well. Thank you everyone, and thank you to all the lovely audience being here for giving your time. Thank you. Yeah, with this we have a second session here on climate finance. I'll love to represent here for we are just starting with this. Yeah.